Super Rugby Saturday games, folks. The bunch of them. We'll just hit them all out in one video today. Seeing as these guys have been pretty consistent with getting the squads out, which is different from what Super Rugby used to be like when they would just come out whenever the damn teams felt like it. Excuse me. But yeah, they seem to be putting team announcements out pretty consistently now, which is refreshing to see. It almost seems like it's a competition being organised with some kind of actual organisation. I should say though that the Moana Pacific and Hurricanes game has been postponed. Moana Pacific can't catch a break, although it's not them with the COVID cases this time. It's the Hurricanes. If you guys aren't aware, New Zealand is flooded with COVID cases at the minute, including my two kids and my wife. I'm somehow still testing negative. Fingers crossed I can get through the rugby this weekend before they pass it on to me. But yeah, that game's going to be postponed. So Moana Pacific is still just one game in, another game postponed. We wish the Hurricanes guys a speedy recovery. Because there's so many games on, I'll do timestamps, by the way, below if you want to skip to a game you're particularly interested in. But anyway, lineups and key stats. Blues, Highlanders. The Blues are 1 from 2. 1 win, 1 loss. They snuck through at the death last week against the Chiefs. They are playing the Highlanders this week at Albany, so they're over on the shore. The Highlanders are yet to pick up a win, but haven't been bad per se. They just haven't been getting wins. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this one ends up playing out. The Blues have had to rejig their lineup, especially in the midfield, because Harry Plummer is out for the season, and Roger Tuivasa-Sheck is out for over a month. So they've had to rejig things in the midfield anyway. Bryce Heem's come in at 12. He's not been with the squad as yet, so he's rejoined up and he's put in at 12. Don't know that I've seen him play 12 before. Maybe wing and centre, but not second 5. Anyway, we'll see how he goes there. Could be an area that the Highlanders look to exploit. Taine Plumtree comes in at 6. We've still got Dalton at 7. He is captain. And Beauden is starting at 10 this week. Perofeta is still at fullback, so it'll be interesting to see who does the kicking. I'm also not sure. Perofeta maybe has the more accurate boot at this point based on last week. So yeah, we'll see how they go. It's a little bit of changes. Sam Darry's also getting the start. So yeah, it's a bit of a rejig lineup. They've put in Telea on the bench too. That's Tanielu Telea. Highlanders, a little bit of rejigging, but not too much. A few guys have kind of switched positions. Scott Gregory's up from the bench into the midfield. Coombs Famberling switches wings. Fingers crossed for the Highlanders. He's going to have a better outing than he did last week. I don't want to... one game in, just had a bit of the dropsies last week, so fingers crossed for him. He has a bit less of that this week, although as a Blues fan, it would suit me for him to drop the ball a few times. Dalwai comes in on the left wing. Gareth Evans moves to 7. Michaeli Tu'u gets a start at 8. Aaron Smith's back starting at 9, and he's captain. Selby-Rickit gets a start. He was on the bench last week, so it's a little bit of rejigging, not real kind of wholesale changes for the Highlanders. Stats-wise, the Blues are generating a lot of clean breaks, 6 a game, to the Highlanders 3. So that speaks to the Blues' ability to get some go-forward ball. But the Blues are conceding 7 clean breaks and the Highlanders 5. So, yeah, the Blues are a better ball in hand, but not so much at the old defence. Tackling stats kind of come out the same. Individuals-wise, Clarke is right up there. He's first equal in clean breaks. Remember, the Blues have only played 2 games, so that speaks to how he started the season. Thomas Umanga-Jensen, second in the competition for defenders beaten. So like I mentioned, the midfield may be an area where he's able to shine because he's in there at 12. Predictions-wise, the bookies have got the Blues by 10. And the algorithm has got the Blues by a whopping 17. So that's the first game on Friday. The second Friday game is the Rebels against the Brumbies. The Rebels have been pretty bad, folks. I've got their gear on because the chance of me wearing their gear for a win in the review seems very slim. They're playing the Brumbies. They are at home, and the Brumbies are away, I think, for the first time. So the Brumbies are 3-0, and they've looked pretty solid. So one would expect them to kind of continue on. Good news for the Rebels. They got Reece Hodge back after his suspension. Andrew Callaway is back on the right wing, and he was in cracking form last year. And Ulesi is back at 2. So they've got a few guys back in the squad. Haley Petty's even back on the bench. So that's a bit of good news for the Rebels, because yeah, the first few rounds have not been hard, because even they're on the bench as well. So they've got some good guys back into the squad. For the Brumbies, it's kind of stable. Interestingly, they're rotating their hookers seemingly week in, week out. McInerney gets a start this week, so there's no fighting Ga'a. Scott Seo gets a start. Tom Hooper's in the second row. Alalato is still captain. Jesse Mogg moves from the bench to the left wing. So yeah, it's mostly stable, but with a wee bit of rotation. The Rebels, their stats make pretty hard reading, folks. I mean, they got the fewest clean breaks generated in the competition, and they concede the most clean breaks of any of the Aussie sides. So it's worst of one, worst of the other, which is not ideal. It's pretty hard to find positive stats for them at the minute. Also, the Brumbies, they've got the most mauls set of any Aussie side, so that kind of makes sense with the way they like to play. But don't sleep on their backs, because their backs have been lightning. I mean, Jesse Mogg's come off the bench and scored a few tries against the Drua. Tom Wright's been lighting it up. So yeah, it's a balanced side, are the Brumbies. They've got the most tries of any of the Aussie sides thus far. So yeah. Individuals, Matt Phillips, the top line-out taker in Super Rugby this year. So there you go. That's a positive one. So he's a key man for them at line-out time. Tom Wright is first equal with Caleb Clarke in clean break. So good to see him having a wee good offensive start to the season. Predictions-wise, the bookies have got the Brumbies by 14, and the algorithm says Brumbies by 3, which is probably a wee bit conservative, but we'll see. Maybe this is the week the Rebels step things up. Saturday games, like I mentioned, the Hurricanes game is off, so you got Crusaders Chiefs, which could be a pretty tiny one. Crusaders have started the season 3-0. Remember, they played a bit of a mixed lineup against Moana Pacifica last week and still managed to squeak by with a bonus point win. Like, they won the game easily enough, but the bonus point came in at the death. The Chiefs are 1-1. Remember, they've had one game postponed against Moana Pacifica, so they're a game behind the 8 ball, and they could have won it last week against the Blues with that last kick, but it didn't quite come off. So it's kind of back to familiar service with the Crusaders. A lot of big guns are back. Will Jordan's at fullback, Sever Reese is back, Braden Ennell's back, David Havili's back, Lester Fainganuku's back, Moonga starts at 10, Brent Hall starts at 9, so it's a whole new back line. Moody's back, Taylor's starting, Newell is interestingly starting at 3 because I think Jaeger's injured. Scotty Barrett and Sam Whitelock are back, so there's a bunch of All Blacks back in this Crusader side. Matera's still there at 8, so yeah, not what you would call consistent, but well rested, if nothing else. The Chiefs have made a few nominal changes. Gatland starts at 10 this week. There's no Josh Ioane. Xavier Rowe gets a start at 9 as well. There's no Brad Weber. Ta'avao starts. I think he's getting his 50th cap for the Chiefs, which is pretty pleasing for him. Va'e moves into a more familiar role in the locks instead of the number 6 jersey, which he was in last week. Kalen Boshier gets a start at 6 as well. ALB gets a start. So, I mean, you'd look at that Crusaders lineup and say they should probably get the job done. Crusaders have got the best lineout in the competition thus far. They've also got the most penalties conceded by only a marginal amount, but the most penalties conceded of any of the New Zealand teams. And interestingly, the most kicks from hand from any of the New Zealand teams, although that is only marginally more than others. But, you know, we often talk about the Crusaders in terms of their line breaks and all the tries and whatnot, but they've got a pretty capable kicking game as well, which is kind of what makes them a bit of a complete team, eh? The Chiefs' goal kicking is at 55% by my count, which is the worst is it the worst in the comp? I think it is, or is it the worst in New Zealand? The line-out percentage is also the worst in the New Zealand team, so that goes up against the Crusaders, who are the best in the comp. But they do have the fewest turnovers conceded of any of the New Zealand teams, so it's not all kind of secondary stats compared to the Crusaders. If you're looking for individuals, Christie is the top tackler in the competition with 59 thus far. The next best tackle has made 42, so that guy is a proper machine. Soakula, remember they need to play 2 games, the Chiefs. He's the 6th in carries for the competition and the 6th for offload, so if it feels like he's been everywhere, it's because he has. The bookies for this one have got the Crusaders by 11, and the algorithm says Crusaders by 14, so predicted to get it done at home. The next one is the Reds and the Drua, which could be an interesting. Remember, the Drua are coming off their first ever win, albeit against the Rebels, And the Reds back from Perth to take on the Ndru at home. Reds were good last week, man, against the Force. It's a good tester for them because the Reds hadn't looked to be firing on all cylinders thus far, and they had a few injuries, but they really stepped up pretty well. So they're back at Suncorp. They'll certainly be big favourites. Petaya moves to fullback this week, so that's a positional shift for him. My screen just flashed. Hooper and Tupou get starts this week. Remember, they were both on the bench last week. The big props. McCrite's captain. They've had a bit of a cursed captain's jersey thus far, have the Reds, so fingers crossed he stays healthy, because Salakailoto was captain last week and got injured within like the first 2 minutes. James O'Connor's still there at 10, and he was pretty essential to what they were doing in their game last week. He absolutely ran the show. Connor Vest is on the bench, and he should be getting his debut if he comes on, so congratulations to him. For the Ndrua, it's pretty stable. Dolo Koto gets a start at hooker, and Togiatama is the replacement hooker, so the regular hooker seems to be out of the 23. I'm not sure if that's an injury or what. Teti Tele'a also gets a start at 10, and the side just looked a bit more slick when he came on last week, so fingers crossed he can kind of continue that form he brought last week into the team this week. Otherwise, the side's pretty stable. Like Voto's still there at 13, and he was immense last week as well, so yeah, it'll be interesting to see if we see Miramira get a big line break like he did last week down the wing. The Reds will certainly have to be careful not to leave that space out wide, because the Ndru will punish it for sure. The Reds line out is among the worst in the competition, only marginally, but yeah, it's not been the best start to their set piece so far. And interestingly, them and the Crusaders make the most kicks from hand per game, and they're the teams who've had 3 from 3. It's not necessarily a 1-for-1 stat, but yeah, it's just interesting that having a good kicking game does seem to be pretty important. It's only marginal that they've got the top amount of kicks, but it is still a fact. Whereas the Drua just managed 13 kicks a game. Like the average is about 21. Crusaders and the Reds are like up to 25. Yeah, the Ndrua just 13 kicks a game, but yeah, I guess that just means they like to run the ball. Turnovers conceded wise, though, the Ndrua, that's the area they need to get better, and I think they are tracking in the right direction, but they're still the team that coughs up the ball most of any of the teams in Super Rugby Pacific thus far. They're averaging 20 a game. The average for the competition is 15, so that's a wee bit too high. Individuals, Vota is the second for defenders beaten, the second for run meter, so he's been immense. Yeah, for the Reds, Harry Wilson has just been carrying like a storm, man. He is he's loving the ball in hand thus far this season. Predictions wise, the bookies have got the Reds by 25, and the algorithm has got the Reds by 32. The last game is a Sunday game between the Waratahs and the Force. I think this could be one of the more closely fought games based on what we've seen thus far. Neither of these teams has been bad, and neither of these teams has been phenomenal. You can judge by their records, 1 and 2 for each of them, but both of them are showing a bit of promise, so I'm kind of keen to see how this one goes. It's from Leichhardt Oval on Sunday. The Waratahs have made a few changes. Same front row. Max Douglas has come in the second row, and Alex Newsom switched from fullback because Will Harrison's up from the bench to start at 15 this week, so they kind of got the double playmakers thing going on with Donaldson and Harrison at 10 and 15. Jake Gordon's still captain. He's been really good at 9. For the Force, Kunzel gets a start at 12. So Kahui is dropping to the bench. They've also kind of got dual playmakers there with Pasitoa and Kunzel at 10 and 12. So that's, I don't know, man. We could see a wee bit more kicking in this game. That'll be an interesting one to see how that kind of plays out. Lee Warner switches from lock to Lucy. Jeremy Thrush is in the second row. Otherwise, it's pretty stable. Reedy is named on the bench. I initially heard that he'd been suspended for a week for having a wee drink of wine on the plane, but it seems like he is still there. So, yeah, we'll see how that goes. The Waratahs have generated more clean breaks on average than any of the other Aussie teams thus far. Like, they're averaging almost 6 clean breaks a game. The average of the Aussie teams is just under 4. So, yeah, but they're still not the finished product. Like, they dominated the Reds stats-wise, but couldn't necessarily get the points from creating the opportunity, which is, I guess, that next level they need to go to. The Force makes the most passes of any of the Aussie sides and the most runs, so there's a lot of recycle ball from the Force. Like, I still reckon they lack a little bit of that kind of cutting edge Like it's I don't know. They're trying to kind of grind you down at times instead of just have that little bit of spark. But I guess that'll come. Remember, there's still a few new combinations in that four-side with a few guys. Mataele has been looking particularly dangerous, but Lee Warner, second in the competition for carry, second in the competition for offload, so he's been ever present. Parise is first in the competition for defenders beaten. That guy, I think, has got a bit of potential as well in terms of he's not anywhere near his like maximum like ceiling where he can go in rugby union, so I think he's still learning the trade, but he's certainly got that raw talent at the moment for sure. Predictions wise, it's the Waratahs by 3 with the bookies and by 6 with the algorithm. So yeah, there you go, guys. All the games on this weekend. Remember, this one's postponed, so we'll see how things go. 2 on Friday, 2 on Saturday, 1 on Sunday. You guys let me know your thoughts, how things are going to go, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.